That's good.
Greg Nared, Jeff. Hey, how you doing?
You had a better party winner than me.
No, you had a great run. Don't you have a championship ring? I don't have any.
I don't either.
Okay. I'll reach out to you afterwards. I'd love to have. I'll reach out to you afterwards.
Yeah, I'd love to do it.
I told you, what happens in Wilmington stays in Wilmington, so feel free to say anything. Okay. It's just video, I can't control the video. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. So for those that don't know me, or maybe this is your first time attending our Scoreboard Speaks program, my name is Shelby Boatman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Clinton County History Center. Very excited to see a great crowd tonight. Thank you all so much for coming out. We have Jim Bailey via virtual Zoom behind me here. And then we have Greg Nared, who has graciously flown in from Dallas, Texas to join us. So I'm very excited to have this conversation. You all may be wondering, where is the MC of the night? And Mr. Mark Huber is in Nashville this evening. But when we set this date, we said, who do people want to see more? Do they want to see Greg more, or do they want to see Mark more? We all know the answer there. So Ron Reddick has generously opted to be our MC for the evening, and I'm sure he will do just as fine job. As I mentioned Wednesday of this week with our baseball event with Dick Michener and Rob Butcher, this is potentially our final Scoreboard Speaks program of the year. Mark and I are taking a month off in October due to talking tombstones and other activities with the History Center. We don't have any additional programs lined up for the time being, but if that changes, we will absolutely communicate that with our membership and with you all attending tonight. So we're very excited for an evening of conversation about front office and the sports world and all that you can do in that industry. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Ron Reddick.
Thank you, Shelby. You hear me okay? Dugan, can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again for taking the time. I know you're on a little vacation out in Denver, Colorado, but we appreciate you taking the time to join us, and also for Greg flying in from Dallas, but he owed us one because he missed the first one. But we did excuse him because I think Dallas was in the playoffs. But it's great to have you both here. This is, I think I've attended all but one of these. I found it very informative and just very interesting, and I'm so thankful Shelby and everybody thought this idea up, and it's just been great. So hopefully we can continue that, and I think probably the next one ought to be professional ladies golfers. How about that, Gabby? Congratulations. Gabby Woods is here, Jim. She just played in her first LPGA tournament yesterday at TPC Riverbend, so we're very proud of her and her family. So. But again, this is I think the sixth in the series. They've had basketball, which Greg had to miss because of the playoffs. They had football and some very interesting characters there. Big Daddy Wilson, classmate of Jim and John, and also the baseball, just most recently. Athletic trainers, which was great because can't remember the guy's name, but he was a trainer for the Detroit Tigers and different places, and he got to started around here in Clinton County. So a lot of hidden gems throughout the area, and then a Wilmington College sports evening as well. So it's just a great program, and so glad to be a part of it. But tonight we're continuing that series with two true legends in Clinton County. This is probably a good way to end it because it's going to feed the fire for the coming year. But Greg and Jim, tremendous athletes in high school growing up. We've heard their exploits. We're going to hear more about it tonight. But they also, in the field of the front office, as Shelby would say, but athletic management, administration, you're not going to find two more experienced guys than these two anywhere in the country, I would say. And we're fortunate to have them right here from Clinton County. So the way it's going to work, I've divided this into two segments. The first segment is what I call the early years discussion. And the early years would be recreation department stuff. I mean, we all have gone through that. There's some interesting stories I know Greg has to tell. I talked to Jim a little bit about some of those. And then working your way up through junior high and then into high school. And we're going to get into that. And Jim's frozen up a little bit. I don't know where Sherry's at. Okay, he's back. I think you just need a break. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about that. We're going to ask some questions, and then I'm going to turn it over to you to ask some questions about the early years. And then we'll get into the college through today discussion. That's where it gets kind of interesting, I think, with these guys, with the Browns and with Nike and with Mavericks and with all the things that they've done. So I'm going to rely on you a lot to come up with some good questions, and we'll go from there. So that's the kind of the format we're going to follow. It's a little different than what Mark had done, but I thought I don't want to lose any of the early part by going on to the second part, forgetting about it. So we'll continue that way. Rather than me keep talking, I'm going to turn it over to them right now to kind of introduce themselves.
I'm frozen at their end.
Okay. We'll get somebody on it, Jim. Hopefully it'll kick back in. That being said, Greg, you can
I'm
go.
just hearing you periodically.
It's a Jim side. It's a Jim
Oh,
side.
okay. Something on your side, she said, Jim, so might get your tech guy there. Up in the mountains, in the middle of nowhere. But I'm gonna have them talk a little bit about, their background, where they're from, when they graduated, and all those things. So I'm gonna start out and let Greg talk, then we'll move on to Jim. Hopefully he'll be unfrozen.
Perfect. First, Shelby, thank you for the invite. It's always a pleasure to come back to the great town of Wilmington. Mr. Ruddy, thank you for seeing. So geez, it started back in, I guess I graduated from high school in 1985. Obviously went to elementary, middle school, high school here. Amazing experience, so many things to share with you, and I'll share throughout the conversation. Left Wilmington, had an opportunity to play football at Ohio State, and so please don't hold that against me.
You worked hard.
He sure did. But verbally committed to play football at Ohio State, and decided at the last hour to follow my passion. And my passion was to play basketball, and maybe have a chance to play one day in the NBA. That didn't happen. I do work in the NBA, so I'm still in the NBA. And then I had to go to school at University of Maryland, played basketball there for 4 years, majored in speech communication. Graduated from Maryland, 89, started working. Had a chance to play basketball overseas, but decided that we had enough of basketball and decided, you know what, I'm gonna work. Got my degree, I'm gonna work. Matter of fact, at graduation, Coach Halley, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Wilt, Mr. Summers all came to my graduation. Thank you, Coach Halley. So graduated from University of Maryland. Then I got into the sports industry a year after I graduated. I started with the Washington Wizards, Bullets back in the day, and I did some ticket sales. Got a call from Nike and started working at Nike and spent 15 years at Nike. I started on the sports marketing side and I got a chance to work with the Eastern Conference players, people at that time, back in '92, Jordan, Penny Hardaway, Gary Payton. Got a chance to work with some really high-profile NBA players. I did that for 3 years and then worked on the product side. I did basketball apparel and brand Jordan apparel. Before they had brand Jordan, we just called it Jordan apparel. And just kind of managed the business of basketball apparel for Nike. And then I get a call from Phil Knight, who's the chairman of the board, one of the founders at Nike, and says, hey, we just signed this young kid out of Stanford who plays golf. I'm like, I know nothing about golf. He says, well, you don't have to. I'm like, okay, you sure? And he says, you understand how the Nike product processes work, but you also understand how to work with athletes. He said, so you'll be great for it. So I worked in golf for 10 years, and year 8 in golf, and my last, probably year 7 in golf, year 6, 7. Got another call from Phil Knight, said there's a young lady out in Hawaii, her name's Michelle Wee. She's an amateur at the time, but I want her here at Nike. So I recruited Michelle and signed Michelle to Nike. And worked with her at Nike for a year, and then left Nike, worked as a sports agent, worked as an agent for 5 years, worked in golf as Michelle's Lee's agent for a year. Couldn't get out of the agent business fast enough. There's some values that have to align, and some values that I'll talk about that all started here in Wilmington. That did not align with me from an agent standpoint. I really wanted to get in the agent business, and I wanted to get in the agent business because I wanted to really focus on basketball, and I wanted to transform the industry a little bit if I could, helping young people, NBA players, just the importance of preparing for life after basketball. I couldn't do it by myself, so I decided to leave the agency. Ended up working, I did some consulting, worked as a coach, and then the last 10 years I've been working for the Dallas Mavericks, and I work as their senior vice president. I oversee youth basketball, player relations, and esports for the Mavericks. I have 2 wonderful daughters, Jackie, and my oldest daughter, who just recently moved to Dallas, about 10 minutes from me, who I have I got a grandson. He's 2 years old. Yeah, one of the amazing experiences in life. And then I have my youngest daughter, Jamie, who you probably read about most, but played at Tennessee, still plays professional basketball. Her first 2 years, she played with Las Vegas Aces. The last 4 years, just played overseas. So she's currently playing over in Turkey for the 2nd year in a row. So.
You got somebody here, family?
Yes. Oh, yeah, I'll get my mother here. Hey. Yeah.
That's great to see you.
Yeah, she just turned 80 in April, man. She's man. That's my rock. That's my rock there.
Yeah, I don't think I could have done that good a job, so I think I made a good decision. Very nice. Well, next up is Jim Dugan Baylor. First of all, I don't know where that name Dugan, D-U-G-A-N, right?
Yep.
Where did that start? How did that start?
Well, you knew my dad, so he hung that name on me about 5 minutes after I was born. It's no relation to anything. So who knows where things came from in history?
Well, I do remember his mom and dad, my mom and dad were really good friends.
Yeah.
So I always remember Bill calling Jim Dugan, but I just called him Dugan. I just thought that was his name. But anyhow, Jim, I'll turn it over to you and kind of along those lines, what you're doing now and family and all those good things.
Okay. Well, right now I'm up in the mountains of Colorado with family, just having a great time. I grew up in Wilmington. I can't remember a time that we weren't involved with sports. John Patton and I met when we were 4 years old, and we used to get in trouble for racing home from grade school to get out on the ball diamond or football field or whatever we had created to compete on at the time. I'm extremely thankful for having been born and raised and lived in Wilmington. I owe an awful lot to that experience and all the people I got to know. And you know, in a town like ours, everybody raises you, not just your parents. You try doing something a little out of kilter, and you find that out in a hurry, because word gets back home pretty quickly. I played football and basketball. I quit playing baseball when my little friends learned how to throw a curveball, and ran track. Fortunate enough to get a scholarship offer at Florida State, play football. That offer came from Bobby Bowden, who was a position coach at the time, a receivers coach. And those of you who may remember Esther Williams, I was in her speech class. Esther was a great teacher, a wonderful lady, but she didn't have a lot of time for sports. So there was a knock on the door, and I see Okie Waddell standing out there. And she said, "Mr. Modell wants to see you." And I walked out in the hall, and there was Bobby Bowden, who offered me a trip down to Florida State to play ball. And of course, I jumped at that. I'm sure as the greatest influence other than my parents in my life was Okie Waddell. Fortunate enough to play for him his first 3 years in Wilmington. And he instilled such a level of character and competitiveness in all of us that has carried over throughout my life. I can honestly say I never made an important decision without the last question being, what would Okie tell me to do? I couldn't always talk to Okie because I was away, but I always knew what the answer was. A few times I thought I knew better, and that's when I made my mistakes. In Florida State, I found out that I wasn't good enough to play college football, concentrated on getting a degree, and then went to law school at Michigan, and went to work for a law firm in Cleveland. And one of the first projects I was assigned to work on, the owner of the Browns, Art Modell, the stadium was in horrible shape and horrible disrepair. He had made a deal with the city of Cleveland to take over the operation of the stadium. They agreed to put in, I think, $10 million, which was a lot of money back then. And then we had to make subleases with the Browns and the Indians to play there. So I ended up doing a lot of that legal work and got to know Mr. Modell through that. And along the way, he offered me a job as general counsel for the Browns, which I left at, of course. Being around the team, at first, the one job, we had a general manager at the time, and that was the one job I knew I didn't want. I just saw him, most of his time was spent arguing with agents over player contracts, and that didn't look like a whole lot of fun. And after about a year or so, general manager and Mr. Modell got into an argument, and the general manager left. So I spent the next month doing the most research I think I've ever done, trying to find somebody to replace him. And finally Art came to me and said, "Look, I know you don't want to be general manager, but I've decided to be my own general manager. I've gotten too far away from the players. I just need you to help me out on the details. Will you do that?" So I said, "Sure." So about 2 days later, he came into my office and put a letter on my desk and said, this is the kind of detail I just can't handle. And it was a letter from our starting outside linebacker, All-Pro Clay Matthews, demanding a trade. So that was the kind of details I had to deal with. And of course, the major event from that was the move to Baltimore when the stadium just became unusable. So it's been involved in the negotiation of that and getting that done. And like all NFL jobs, it ended while we were in Baltimore. So we moved out to San Diego, and I decided that I'd had enough of being bossed by somebody, so I started doing independent consulting work, mostly around sports facilities, and ended up being the president of a couple of attempts to start new professional football leagues to play in the spring. So that's my story.
Okay, what about family, Jim?
Pardon?
What about family?
Oh, married, got 2 daughters, 4 grandkids. One's in San Diego, but they're the ones that have recently bought a place up here in the mountains where I am today, so that's great. The other's in Boulder, got 4 grandkids, and the youngest is now in their 5th year at UC Boulder.
Okay, thank you very much. Good job. I'm going to take this opportunity. I did a little research. I mean, I know Greg and I knew Jim, but I just got to me. I'd get online and look at some of the old newspaper articles, and it just so happened that there were 2 almost full-page articles written about each one of these guys, about 20 years apart, but they all summarized their high school careers mainly, pretty succinctly. So I was going to share that with you, what I found out, just so you know what kind of athletes, what kind of people that we're dealing with here tonight. I'll try not to take too much time. This one goes out to Jim, Duke and Bailey. David Myers, who was a great sports writer for the News Journal back in the 60s, he actually almost would write a book about a basketball game. He used all those fancy words and the alliteratives and all the things that some of you English teachers would be very proud of. But this article on Dugan was called, the title was Sand, Grit, and Scholarship. And I'll give you a couple highlights here. It was a great article, June 16, 1964, about Dugan's character and his desire to succeed. And basically, it was talking about his scholarship to Florida State and how he came to get that. But he described Dugan's traits and his talents, which led to a full scholarship, as Dugan said, tuition, room, board, and $15 a month. They said he never got paid. You got paid $15 a month. That's what David Myers said. And the criteria, the contract said he must play football, maintain a C average or above, and if injured and can't play, the scholarship was guaranteed. So it was a full guaranteed scholarship until he didn't play anymore. And I guess you took over, or Bill Bailey took over the tuition at that point, right? But we also shared a story I thought was very interesting and spoke to the dedication that he displayed. This happened during the SUL track meet, 1964. At Wilmington, it was a center track, quarter-mile track, and the grandstands were the same as they are now for the most part. But Dugan was running the anchor on the 880-yard, not meters then, 880-yard relay. And he was tracking down a guy from Washington Courthouse who was their best track guy. And he got his cleat caught on a concrete berm and took a spill. And in Myers' words, as I said, the bruising, lacerating belly slide while running anchor left him with some deep cuts and scrapes filled with sand and grit. So the sand and grit on the title. But Dugan picked himself up and finished the race, actually beating 3 other schools after taking that fall. After the race, Paul Maple and Jim Knowles were the coaches. It was a mess. It was scraped, deep cuts But he tried to take him to the hospital. Jim wouldn't go. He said, I'm going to run with 220 yards. And lo and behold, he ran and he won that. So that's a perfect example of the type of determination, the grit. He says Okie Waddell gave it to him. I think he had it instilled into him long before that. So the coaches themselves described in this article, described him as fiercely competitive yet humble. Coach Okie Waddell claimed Dugan was not a normal person for the time. I had to think about that, Dugan. I think it was a compliment. And I got to thinking, what was happening in 1964? The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Peace, Love, was just getting started. Peter Barnes, do you remember Peter Barnes? He had the first Beatle haircut. It was a exchange student from London or England. He had a Beatle haircut where everybody else had cuts above the ear. I thought that was the coolest thing. And he kicked soccer style. Extra points for the football team. I remember that. I was just a little kid, of course, back then. Right? I do remember that. But I think that's what Okie was alluding to, that there is a straight kid who's hard work, do whatever it takes, and all these other hippies are running around with their hair hanging down. And, Okie just out of the Marine Corps. So, yeah. So, but it was truly a foretelling of things to come. So next, in my search, I found Steve Blackledge, sports editor from the News Journal in 1984, wrote, "Football or basketball, Nared faces big decision." And as I read that, I thought, man, this really was, I remember Greg playing, but this really was a big decision. But on Steve's article, he said on the football field, number 7, has an arm like Dan Marino, elusiveness like Steve Young, the smarts of Ken Anderson, and the leadership of Joe Montana. Not bad compliment. On the basketball court, number 21, has the flair, the charisma, the passing skills of his idol, Magic Johnson, the crowd-pleasing aspects of Julius Erving, and the dominance and consistency of Larry Bird. Not bad on the basketball floor. Ohio State, Pitt, UCLA, Michigan, Penn State, Miami, Florida, were a few that wanted him in football. Ohio State, Kentucky, Virginia, Dayton, Michigan are licking their chops over his basketball abilities. And Greg said he started playing basketball back in 5th grade, the rec program. Jim and I talked about that a little bit today. And like all Wilmington 5th graders and 6th graders did in Wilmington, he played rec ball. But he said he averaged over 30 points a game, he thought, in 5th grade. I could not find documentation. I remember when I was in 5th grade, we averaged as a team maybe 4. But I don't doubt Greg that he probably did in 5th grade. Mom might be able to attest to that. She probably saw a few of those games. He was an all-league performer in both sports from 10th grade on. He was 3-time All-Ohio basketball, 2-time All-Ohio football. The senior year, the Chicago Tribune labeled him the top quarterback in the nation. I didn't know that. OSU assistant coach, football coach Jim Tressel. Greg could step right in at quarterback in virtually any school in the nation. University of Kentucky basketball coach Joe B. Hall. You bet we heard of him. He's definitely a top priority for us. And Greg said they were allowed, 5 visits? Greg's final comment was, UCLA sent me a picture of the cheerleaders. His quote is, I might have to make that one first. I'm sure he doesn't remember that one. Did you go to UCLA? All right, so that's a lengthy introduction, but I thought it was very important to share with you the quality and caliber of people we're dealing with. So I'm going to ask a couple questions, and some of them have already been answered, but they can rehash it. And then we'll go to you guys for the early years. So you've heard a lot of it. But this one's for both of you, and we'll start with you, Jim. We know participation in sports played an important part in your early years here in Clinton County. You've already talked about that, and you talked a little bit about your exploits there. How do you think growing up in Clinton County helped you in your sports and eventually in your successful career?
Well, I think that the values that I learned not only in sports, but just being in the community. But as John Patton and I always said, we both had two mothers and two fathers, and probably that may not have been enough. But we've had great values and had a lot of fun. And as I said before, when Okie Waddell came to town, I think what he did, and he always said, we tried to give him credit, and he always would push it back at us, saying we were good kids. But I think what he did was channel that and focus that for those of us that were fortunate enough to play for him, in learning how to take all that energy and all of the stuff that goes inside of you as a kid and get it focused in a specific direction, and then just become relentless in trying to achieve that goal. And those are the kind of attributes that don't go away, and I think have served me certainly served me very well.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
Well, first of all, I started playing sports because my father played basketball, and that was just a part of our DNA. So you're going to play sports. Demanding father in terms of just playing the game, and then got a chance to watch my brother David, who's no longer with us, watch Gary Williams play. I just knew that I'm playing sports, no matter how you look at it. My brother Tim got me into football. In middle school, he played quarterback, so he kind of was the first person to kind of teach me the game of football. So I learned sports from family really at an early age, and then as you grow to become pretty good player. Matter of fact, I had a conversation with Gabby just a second ago. Then you got to pass the torch, and my brother did all he could, which was amazing. He didn't just pass the torch, he passed it to Coach Howard, who's here, who I've spoke about many times over the years, who just have been just a huge part of who I am today in terms of just, Jim talked about just values. If you think of some values, I talk about my core values. What are your core values? And one, it's just trying to be a high character person. This is kind of what I've learned here in this great town of Wilmington, and Coach Holly played a huge part of it. Just doing what you say you're going to do, period. Respect, right? You learn how to respect people really in every area of your life. And then I go to work ethics, I look at my mother back here who worked 2 jobs growing up. And then I go to the University of Maryland and I get a 5.5 by 8.5 plaque by Lefty Drizel that says the harder you work, the luckier you get. I'm like, shoot, I learned that from my mom. Yeah, I'll take that one. But I took it and then I embraced it, and I even took it a step further. But then you talk about a growth mindset, and then from a growth mindset, you just learn, just watching some of the folks around here, and the values, that's just who I am, and that's growing up and playing sports here, that's what it taught me.
Well, I think you both have been on the big stage. You both have run across kids that didn't have the opportunities that our kids do in this small town. I think that would make you appreciate it even more once you see the results of that. So we're lucky to have you. Appreciate it. Switching gears just a little bit, I'd like for you both to talk a little bit about the recruiting process. I know, Jim, you weren't quite recruited by the number of schools that Greg was? No offense, but I'm glad he didn't hear that. We can talk about it now. Just tell me when he moves again. But Greg, you know, all that recruiting, and you don't have to go into a whole lot of detail, but out of all those schools, why Maryland?
Well, first of all, huge kudos. First I give it to my mom, and then I give it to Coach Howley. Those were two people that I asked the question, what should you do? Because you really don't know as a 17, 18-year-old kid as to what's next, where should you go? And I got the same answer. What makes you happy? Do what you want to do. Follow your passion. And you want to blame anybody here, or blame me for not going to Ohio State? Please blame me too. But the recruiting part for me, I knew if I was playing football, I was going to Ohio State. Period. Coach Mr. Patton here was on me for I think 10 years. yeah. Still there. So I knew I was going to Ohio State, and you know Gary's one of my heroes. Growing up, Gary Williams, and watching him play, and you know, Bengals being at a training camp here. Yes, this saw all that, you know, and you know, as a young kid, you want to dream, right? And you want to dream about playing at the highest level. And so when the recruiting process came, basketball is, and I loved it, and I know I wasn't gonna get beat up. Concussion. I probably had many concussions in high school. I just didn't know about it. But really, at the end of the day, I followed my passion, played basketball, something that I absolutely loved. And Maryland ACC, probably one of the best conferences back in the day. North Carolina, Duke, Virginia, NC State, Wake Forest, just really amazing talent. And then I go on a recruiting visit to the University of Maryland, and I don't know if I share this with this group, with Wilmington before, but it's for the first time I got a chance to see people who look like me successful. And nice houses and cars. And I said, I'm going there. If they can do it, I can do it. And that's what really inspired me to go. Whether basketball was second for me, I just want to have an opportunity to do something special. And I thought I could do it there at the University of Maryland.
That's great. Very good choice. Jim, we lost you a little bit. We were just talking about recruiting, and I know you mentioned that Oki had you set up with the coach, and Bobby Bowden, was it? But any other colleges or recruiting, or you just wanted to jump at the football scholarship possibility?
My recruiting was very spotty. 4 or 5 colleges. It was pretty hard. None of which interested me very much. Naval Academy was a possibility, and probably would have gone there, but turned out I'm colorblind and couldn't pass their physical. But then it was Coach Bowden came to Wilmington in the middle of a snowstorm, and going down to Florida sounded pretty good. So once I went down there, I fell in love with the place. Fell in love with Coach Bowden. The head coach at the time was a guy named Bill Peterson, who was known primarily for his malaprops. Is the one I remember most noticeably, and a pep talk before a big game. He was ranting and raving about how we were going to do it, about how important the game was. And he said, this game is so important, we're going to take a 4-plane engine down to the game. So we had been flying little two propeller jobs around, but he was going to fly a 4-plane engine. So, other than that, the recruiting process was I was open to a lot of places, but once I saw Tallahassee, Florida, that was it.
Cheerleaders? Cheerleaders like UCLA, they send you a picture?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Okay, well, we'll go.
Ask him who he had to defend down at Florida State the year.
Well, John Patton has his first question for you.
Well, he knows who it is.
Who did you have to defend at Florida State when you got there?
Fred Biletnikoff. They recruited me as a receiver. And I'm listening to Greg talk, I'm wondering why I'm on this stage. They recruited me as a receiver in the first drill. They started throwing passes to me and they decided right away I was defense because I couldn't catch it. So as freshmen, we were the scout team for the varsity. Freshmen couldn't play back in those days. So my job as a cornerback was to guard Fred Biletnikoff. So I take responsibility for making him into a.
Very good. Oakland Raider, right? Oakland Raider. That's good. Thank you, John. You can chime in anytime. I know you got a lot of background there. This is not all my questions, but I just thought about it. I know, Greg, you spent 4 years in Maryland, 3 years. You didn't play a whole lot in your 4th year. Man, you exploded. Great opportunity. And Jim, as a lawyer and as working with agents, what do you guys think about today's climate with the transfer portal and the NIL? And remember, we got well, she's not an amateur anymore, so we can ask her about it too. Go ahead, Jim. What's your thoughts on NIL and transfer portal?
Well, I don't like it because to me the college game has become a pro game. And I don't think they even make a pretense of talking about the kids going to school anymore. And as Greg just was talking about how important the opportunity was to achieve something. That's not just on the basketball court or football field. It's the opportunity to go to college and learn the things that you learn in college. Not only the courses that you study, but the interactions with people and being in a new world, learning how to get along by yourself. And to me, the guys that are going into college now, I mean, it's wonderful for them. They can make a ton of money. But I think long run, I think they're missing out on some of the things that are valuable with the experience of some of the things Greg was just talking about.
I'm going to speak out both sides of my mouth because I agree exactly what Mr. Jim was talking about in terms of the NIL. I'm watching the Ohio State Marshall football game today, and they talked about their NIL and spending. I think Mr. Jim just talked about he made what, $15? $15, $20 million for the football program this upcoming year. So again, the NIL, it's for me, it's. I think we as folks who work in sports, I think we have to evolve, right? So I think this is just another way where we are evolving in sports. And sports, it's all, I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway, it's all about TV rights deal, big dollars, right? So it's the universities, it's the NCAA receiving that money. It's the athletes now get a chance to get a piece of the pie. Now, should they get that much money? You can argue back and forth. Should they get a stipend? You can argue back and forth. However, I do believe that it's evolved, and we have to, as executives in the sports industry, you have to evolve with the game. I remember Coach K. He talked about players transferring from year to year. He says, guess what? That's what it's all about. We're just in a different time. And we as college coaches, if we don't get better and understand that we're coaching players just one time or 1 year, he says, that's on us. So we just got to get better. So I agree with Mr. Bailey here, but at the end of the day too, I also think that how can we come to, at the end of the day, our senses from a revenue standpoint, make it work better for everyone, one, and two, how can we prepare our young people for life after sport? And I think that's the part that I kind of, you pay these kids, these high-profile players, millions of dollars, and it's millions of dollars these days. How can you prepare them for when it's done? Most of the kids who play in college, they won't get an opportunity to play in pro. I don't care how high-profile you are. You may not play in a pro, and that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Well, I'll honor my pledge to let you ask some questions about recreation ball through, we got into college, so we'll go up to college. So if anybody's got a question, Jim?
I don't want to talk too
Great.
much, but his dad was one of the best, you've been on college yet. Oh, okay. David Nared, Knocker, we called him. He was a boy, when Dugan and I were in the 8th grade, we got to watch him. We sat on the old stage over there at the old high school. And every time your dad got the ball, we knew that they all stood up and we could kiss the girls next to us. Because all the fans stood up. David Nared would make the baskets. Man, he was a great basketball player. Nobody talks about him too much. Marvin Greger was right after him. Marvin was a great player, played at Ohio State. But David Nared was as good as I saw back in the day. I'm sure David remembers that too. So, David Nared, he was great. He was actually.
I sure do that old orange and black checkerboard court.
You hit that fan-shaped backboard and it go clear at half court.
Yeah.
I think Coach Mike Alley could probably appreciate the orange and black checkered court. He taught phys ed there for about 40, 50 years, I think. Anybody else comment or question? We'll be bashful. Okay, well, we're gonna move on to part B, which is, I think, probably gonna be very interesting because we still have about 40 minutes for discussions about their professional career after college. And they've already mentioned a little bit about their experiences and their background. But I think I would like to hear about Dugan's relationship with the Browns, Art Modell, the move from Cleveland to Baltimore, and we'll get into that. And I certainly have Greg talk about life with Tiger Woods. So I think that's going to be pretty interesting, and we can just go from there. But Greg, I'll let you start out. And again, it doesn't have to be about Tiger, it's just about your experiences with Nike and your other exploits.
So one of my core values is growth mindset. And I have been truly blessed to work with two of the best innovators of our time. Phil Knight at Nike for 15 years, and then Mark Cuban with the Dallas Mavericks for 10 years. I've also got a chance to work with two of the greatest athletes of our time. It's Tiger and then Michael Jordan. And the growth mindset is real simple. It's how are you getting better every year, right? Every aspect of your life. For me, it's not only from the business, but from the relationships to your family, to being a better father. I always think about Aristotle, his quote, excellence is not an act, but it's a habit. You got to bring it. Those people that I got, those 4 names that I just mentioned, they just bring it all the time. They have every day, it's time to work, we bring it every single day. And the things that I've learned from them, as I got into my career is just really so important. I'll talk a little bit about my experience with Nike, and being, I think when I started working at Nike, they just became $1 billion company. I think today it's about almost $100 billion. And this is what, 25 years, 30 years ago. So again, the innovation, they focus on technology, they focus on creating, they focus on telling amazing stories. And that's what I've learned from Nike, from Mark Cuban, who is just an amazing entrepreneur who has, I think he has over 100 companies that he owns. We talk about at the Dallas Mavericks being best in class and always trying to be best in class in every area of the business. So we got a chance to learn how, again, excellence part of it. And then you work with the athletes, you know. Tiger is, I would travel with him 2 weeks out every month. He would play 2 weeks a month, his first 8 years of his career. Actually, the first 2 or 3 years, 2 or 3 weeks. And I would travel with him from one tournament to the next. And he would finish the tournament on the Sunday. He would take Monday off, and then he would work again on Tuesday. And then we would leave on Tuesday afternoon, and then he would go to the next tournament. And what I learned from him is that the work that he's done from a practice standpoint has prepared him for the tournaments. So you'll see at a lot of the golf tournaments, you'll see a lot of coaches at golf tournaments trying to work with a player's swings. And he would look over there and says, I got him, I got this guy. He said they're working on it now. So I think that was really important for me in terms of just the work, man. You gotta, another one of my core values, work ethic. Well, you gotta bring it, right? You gotta work, and when you work at it, it sets you up for success. When that big opportunity comes, guess what? You're ready for it. And then MJ, just the growth mindset. You've all probably read about the Breakfast Club, and after I think his second, third year as a pro, he gets 4 or 5 guys together. They work out in the morning in the weight room. Then they'll come back in the afternoon and they'll do individual, and then they come back that night and then they'll play 5-on-5. So just a lot of people don't talk about. A lot of people think that the great ones from an athletic standpoint are great just because they're just super talented. These athletes work. They work extremely hard. And I think Lefty Brazil said, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And that stays with me, and it stayed with me for a long time. But Michael, again, he created the Breakfast Club. 3 years, 4 years after being a pro. He could only go left. He worked on his ball handle. Next year, he got beat up by the Detroit Pistons. I don't know the years, but next year he gets beat up by the Detroit Pistons. Next thing you know, his body looks like a brick house. And then they say, you know what, he couldn't shoot. What's he do? He works on his mid-range three-point. So you just learn how to get better and better, and you got to work at it. And that's what I learned from those two athletes.
Thank you. Jim, I'm curious about your interactions with Art Waddell and things that happened with the move Cleveland to Baltimore. Could you just give us a Cliff Notes version of what your involvement was and how it all came down?
I'm not sure there is a Cliff Note version. Well tried. I want to say the connection cut out. I'm sorry I missed early part of what Greg was saying, but I certainly want to echo what I heard at the end about how hard these guys work. We see them out on the field on Saturday or Sunday playing, but the amount of, particularly in the pros, the amount of work those guys put in and the dedication, it was inspiring to me to be around that. Back to the stadium situation, the Art Modell the stadium was in horrible shape. And Art Modell had purchased 200 acres of land out in the suburbs with the intention of building a stadium to move to. And the city fathers learned of that, and the politicians, and they convinced him to stay downtown and put the same money into refurbishing the stadium that he was gonna put in a new stadium. And he said he would do that, but he wanted City Hall out of the picture. It was being staffed by people who would clock into the convention center, then clock into the stadium, and then go drink beer until it's time to click out. So he wanted total control over the operations, so that was the deal we made. He committed the Browns to a 25-year lease, and the Indians originally committed a 25-year lease, although they cut it back as negotiations went on. So I was, I think in my first year as a lawyer, and a senior partner walked by my office and threw a file on my desk and said, "I want you to take care of this." And I thought it was a joke. The file was just flat, didn't look like anything was in it, so I opened it. And it was a memorandum of understanding among Modell, City of Cleveland, and the Indians cover the deal. So I went to the senior partner and said, "What do you want me to do with this?" He said, "Well, document it." So the only lease I had ever seen before that time was my apartment lease. So I scrambled around, interestingly, asking around about where I could get a good lease. One of the partners said, I think we were involved in George Steinbrenner taking over Yankee Stadium. I bet we've got a copy of that lease around here somewhere. So I searched through the files and I found it, and I used that as my template for the Cleveland lease. So as time went on, fast forward, the city built a new ballpark for the Indians. And the Indians were our prime tenant because they had 80 dates, and of course the big football team only played 10. And although their attendance wasn't that big, the regularity of that was a key part of our economics as far as running the stadium concerned. So we started talking with the city about doing something. We finally came up with a plan to completely renovate the stadium, basically tear down a big part of it and build a new stadium inside the shell. And then the politicians started fighting among themselves, and it became apparent that wasn't going to get done. And our engineers had told us that the upper deck was going to collapse within a period of 3 to 5 years. The concrete was encased steel rebar, and being that close to Lake Erie, the moisture had gotten into that. Rebar was expanding and portions of the concrete were breaking out. So we really had to find a place to play, and it was obvious it wasn't going to be in that stadium. So we worked totally about 2.5 years with Cleveland trying to get a deal done. We got introduced to the people in Baltimore, and we made a deal there in 40 days. We had hoped to hold the announcement of that until after the season was over, but it started leaking out, and we decided we had to go ahead and announce it during the year. So Art went over to Baltimore to hold a press conference to announce the move, and I got the job of gathering the entire staff and players and coaches and everyone in the organization into the players' meeting room and telling them what was going on. So that was very rough, particularly for the salaried people in the organization, which the people, the unsung heroes in sports, as I'm sure Greg would agree with, that were they going to lose their jobs, what was going to happen, etc. So we tried to calm those fears. We had a lot of litigation with that. A lot of death threats, bodyguards, all of that business. But we got over there and got the deal done and got the new stadium built. Which I'm amazed with what they're paying for new stadiums now. We built that stadium for $220 million. And that's just a down payment on what the stadiums they're building now. But it's still a good stadium, it still works fine. So that was quite an experience. One of my favorite stories is I had to go back and forth between Baltimore and Cleveland for the litigation that was going on. And Art was paying for a private plane. I'm thinking, man, we moved here because we're broke. We can't afford this private plane. Nobody knows me. I can get on a plane. So I get on a plane in Baltimore to fly to Cleveland, commercial plane. And I've got a book up in front of my face so nobody would recognize me. And one of the flight attendants walks by and says, "Jim Bailey, I can't believe you guys moved the team." So that was a little bit embarrassing. It was quite a trying time, and but it's turned out for the best. Cleveland got their team back, and Baltimore's had quite a bit of success as well. So that's my story.
Okay, that's great, great. I've got a little one in my research, digging through Jim Bailey's Wikipedia and whatever else is out there. I found this one, Jim, you probably remember, but it's the title was, let me find it. This is the greatest letter an NFL team has ever sent to a fan. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I did.
Can I say it or you want to say it?
Hey, you do it.
Okay. Well, here's
You gotta
the.
give the preface. You gotta tell.
Well, you started then. You started.
Right?
You started then. I can't preface it. You know the.
Okay. We get a letter from a fan telling us that the Browns fans had adopted the practice of taking pages out of the program and folding it into airplanes, paper airplanes, and flying them around the stadium. And this guy, who was a lawyer, wanted to put us on notice that if he or anyone in his family, in his group, suffered an injury to their eye or ear as a result of this, that he was going to hold the Browns accountable. You want to finish?
I'll finish. Here's Jim's response to this attorney. Attached is a letter we received. I feel you should be aware that some a-hole is signing your name to stupid letters. And it's fact checked. Is this real? Yes. Snopes, Raywood, it is true. So he is the guy. And I got to tell you this one story. We talked about my mom and dad and his mom and dad being good friends. And his dad was quite the character. Quite the character. And it was Christmas. Jim said he'd never heard this story, but my dad was not big about decorations for Christmas. And in this particular year, he changed the white bulb in the porch light to green. And he said, "Merry Christmas." And that was it. I thought that was pretty, I do that today. I learned a lot from him. But Bill Bailey, and with Jim's sense of humor, you can see where he got it. Bill Bailey comes to pick up Dad, his mom, Eloisa. They come out and go to the door, and Bill's holding a trophy. And my dad says, "What's this?" He says, you won the Christmas decoration award for this year." He goes, "I didn't decorate. The theme was simplicity, and you nailed it." So my son and I still put green lights in our porch. Okay, well, that's great. You guys, anything else you want to share with the group or add, or does anybody got to have a question now, right? Yeah. Jim?
I just want to make sure John Patton knows that Michigan beat USC.
They just won that game. Oh, well, that's all right. We'll get that team right.
I just want to know whether Greg remembers how many times in playing football in high school, you were standing down about 20 yards down the field with the ball in the air. Woo! Woo! Remember why? You'd always fake that ball down in the middle. We always tell those officials before the game, he's going to make you look bad. Don't go blowing that whistle. So many times, at least one time a game.
Well, I learned that think Gary did it first, right? Gary, and someone in the NFL, who did that, hit it pretty well in the NFL? I know Gary hit it, and then I learned from him how to follow on the greatness here. Yeah. And then I think I hit it just a little bit better than he did. Maybe not, I don't know.
I had some friends in the league said, why did you do that? Why did you just have to go back there and hand it off? I said, you watch it, and then you do.
I think they confuse, because obviously my dark skin always had a white wristband, so you thought the ball was Hey, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Gabby Woods for a second here. Just an amazing young lady. I got a chance to spend time with her just prior to coming here. Just best of wishes to you and your success. LPGA, professional golfer. That's awesome. And Larry and Brenda, great work. Really awesome. I'm excited to watch it for the next few years.
Just a little story about Gabby, the type of person she is. A friend of mine was watching her play with Lily Middleton, I think, somewhere in Dayton. But he was just there for a little while. He was really there to watch Lily because his best friend was her dad or relative. And Gabby walked by and saw Dana, and I think she was with Brenda. And the next day, Dana said, I got this card from Gabby thanking me for coming and watching her. I mean, that's the kind of kid she is. She's so pleasant. And I watched her play. I was able to watch her play Thursday. First tee, second hole, third hole. She wasn't the normal Gabby. She was a little uptight, a little tense. But you're playing with the best in the world, so it's understandable. She did nail the drive. But about the fifth hole, I saw Doug Ledford sit her coach and caddy. I saw Gabby laughing and talking. I said, Gabby's back. It just took a while. That's just your first of many, so you're going to have a great career. And Mom, I've got to ask you, was your son always this nice and personable?
Yes.
He did a good job too. So anything else?
I got to know, that's how I got to know Jim Trussell. He came to every one of his basketball games when High State. He and I sat together many a night to watch him play basketball. Jim Trussell's still a friend of mine. I can call him up and he knows my name. It's amazing, but he wanted you off the bat, but you did great. I went over the day left, you came in and signed it. You cried a little bit. I was on your side, you know that. I saw you on TV with Tiger a lot, man. That was one of the biggest thrills of my life, man.
Coach Trussell, man, he's amazing, man.
He's amazing.
Amazing, man. He attended all football games and all basketball games, and he did it for 4 years. And he just, to this day, I think I caught him maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Like, oh yeah, I remember you.
Oh, yeah.
See, the one said you can remember your sons?
Oh, yeah, I remember. Brett and I went to, over Steve Harvey, a guy from Wilmington, was the head of the Algonquin Club over in Dayton, when Trussell had just gotten the job at Ohio State. And we went over and watched him speak over there. We walked in the lobby, and he was talking to somebody. He stopped and he said, there's one of the best receivers I ever coached. He took my son and I played with him at Youngstown for a while. And he brought Brent's name up in his speech that night. and he said, and Brent had him saying, Brent was just an average guy. And he had a big heart just like his dad. But Trussell was something else. And then that night he said, oh, by the way, I just recruited a guy from Centerville here named A.J. Hawk. I was pretty good recruiter.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot. I appreciate you all coming out. I certainly thank Jim and Greg for being here and the extent that you've made to do this. And you got to come back more often. And Jim was just in for what, your 60th class reunion?
That's right.
That's right.
He's a lot younger than me.
Yeah, he is. I read where
1 month.
he was 17 when he was a senior and turned 18 in August, right?
I helped him get his
Turned 18 in
lessons.
August.
I helped him get his lessons done. Not really.
Well, again, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Shelby for a closing, but we appreciate you all being here. And again, thanks, guys.
All right. Well, hopefully everyone enjoyed this conversation. You found it worthwhile and got something out of it at the end of the day. I want to remind everybody that the museum scoreboard Beyond the Scoreboard exhibit, our museum exhibit is open until 9 o'clock tonight. So please take advantage of that and check that out. I know there's a mention of him in there and many other people you will recognize. But we wanted to create an exhibit that looked at the sports through the lens of Clinton County, and also have an opportunity where everyone felt welcome to come to the museum, regardless of age, regardless of gender, etc. I don't think I mentioned on Wednesday, but we were recently awarded an Ohio Local History Alliance State Award for Outstanding Exhibit with the sports exhibit, so thank you. I will be going in October to the annual meeting to collect that certificate, but we're very, very excited and proud of that opportunity. If you're not able to go through the exhibit tonight, it will be on display through mid to end December, and then after that it's going away. So now is the chance to see it. We'll be developing something new over the winter and come up with something different. But before we close, Greg has graciously brought books that are going to be available for purchase at the back of the room. So if anybody would like a copy of Greg's book, he's also going to be signing those, I think. We haven't talked about that beforehand, but he's going to be signing those. So please see my wonderful volunteer back there if you would like a copy. And we will be in touch if we schedule any further talks. I'm sure something will come up. But just remember that we are taking a break in October. We have Talking Tombstones coming up October 12th. So if you'd like to participate and walk through the cemetery, we would love to have you. Tickets are going pretty quickly for that. And that is one of our biggest fundraisers of the year. We have a lot in store for the Clinton County History Center for the rest of the year and next year, so be sure to keep in touch. If you're not a member, come see me. I'd love to talk to you about that opportunity. And thank you for everyone who is a member. You got in free tonight. I hope you enjoyed that benefit as well. So without further ado, Jim, if you'll hang on there, we'll get a picture in a minute. But please, everyone, give these gentlemen a round of applause. Thank you for attending tonight. Books are in the back of the room. I'm sure if you'd like a picture with Greg, he'd be happy to do that as well. We're going to snag a picture right now for the newspaper. So if you three want to stand here, well, two of you stand here, one of you smile online.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff, it's good seeing you.
You too, Ron. Nice job. Thank you. Sorry I couldn't be there.
We'll get together.